He didn't even look at the baby. He just stood there, in the private wing of a Seoul hospital his own family owned, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and he said the 7 words that would destroy her. "That child is not my son. Take her away." She was still shaking from 14 hours of labor. She had just given birth to his child inside a hospital his grandfather built. And he looked at that baby like a mistake in a shipping manifest, something to be rejected and sent back. But here's the thing, and stay with me, because this is where it turns insane. 3 years later, that same man would tear apart one of the most powerful conglomerates in South Korea, turn against his own family, and destroy the person he trusted most in this world. All because of a birthmark smaller than a coin. If you think you know how this story ends, you don't. Because what she was hiding wasn't just a baby. It was the heir to an empire built on blood money. And someone was willing to kill to make sure that heir never existed. Her name was Seo-yeon, 26 years old, working as a translator for foreign shipping clients. And she had made exactly one mistake in her life, falling in love with Junho Kang. To the public, Junho was the second son of the Kang Group, a massive conglomerate with hands in shipping, construction, and logistics across Busan and Incheon. Forbes called them industrialists. Business magazines called them visionaries. But underneath the boardrooms and the skyscrapers, the Kang family controlled something else entirely: smuggling routes, underground finance, and a network of business partners who didn't ask questions and didn't expect refunds when deals went wrong. Seo-yeon didn't know any of that when she met Junho. She thought he was just a quiet, polite man who came into her office for translation work, and always remembered how she took her coffee. By the time she learned the truth about his family, she was already pregnant. And by the time she worked up the courage to tell him, someone else had already told him something first. Something that made him look at her like a threat instead of the woman he loved. Now here's where you need to lean in, because this next part explains everything that happens for the rest of this video. The Kang family had rivals. The Cho family, a rising underground network trying to take territory from them for over a decade. 3 days before Seo-yeon gave birth, someone close to Junho planted a rumor that Seo-yeon had been sent by the Cho family to get close to him, to plant a fake pregnancy, to weaken the Kang bloodline from the inside. Junho believed it, because in his world, trust gets you killed faster than betrayal ever could. So when that baby was born, Junho didn't see his daughter. He saw a trap wearing a hospital bracelet. But here's what Junho didn't know when he turned and walked out of that hospital room. The person who planted that lie wasn't from the rival Cho family at all. It was someone who sat at the head table at every single Kang family gathering. And that one detail is the piece that changes everything later. Don't go anywhere. Seo-yeon didn't fight him. She didn't beg him to believe her. She packed one bag, took her daughter, she named her Haeun, and moved to Daegu, far from Seoul, working as a night shift translator, raising a little girl who had her father's exact eyes and didn't even know her father was alive. For 3 years, Junho buried himself in the family business. He expanded the Kang Group's shipping routes, closed deals that made his father proud, and grew colder with every year. Employees whispered that he hadn't smiled once since the situation, which is what they called it when they thought he couldn't hear. But something gnawed at him quietly, a small itch he could never fully ignore. Because the person who had warned him about the Cho family spy 3 years ago, his own cousin Tae-min, the one who managed internal security for the family, started making mistakes. Shipment numbers that didn't reconcile. Warehouse inventory that mysteriously vanished and reappeared. Money moving through accounts that Junho didn't recognize. Junho was cold, but he wasn't careless. He began to wonder if he had been lied to about more than just the accounting. Meanwhile, in Daegu, Haeun turned 3. At her small birthday celebration, rice cake, a handful of balloons, nothing extravagant. A woman who used to work in the Kang family's Seoul office happened to visit an old friend nearby and saw Haeun playing in the courtyard. She froze. On the girl's forearm, just below the elbow, was a small, distinct birthmark, a very particular shape that had shown up in Kang family portraits for 3 generations. Not something you could fake. Not something surgery could replicate. Insiders called it the Kang mark, half legend, half fact, whispered about because it was the one thing money and politics could never erase. The woman didn't say anything to Seo-yeon. She went straight back to Seoul and told Junho. And this is the moment the story stops being about heartbreak and starts being about survival. Because the second Junho heard about that birthmark, he didn't feel relief. He felt terror. Because if the Cho family, or worse, someone inside his own family, found out he had a living daughter with the Kong mark before he could protect her, that little girl would become a target before she ever learned to write her own name. You need to hear what happens next, because nobody sees it coming. Junho didn't call Seo-yeon. He didn't send an apology or flowers. He sent 4 men to find her within 6 hours. Seo-yeon, finishing a late shift, had no idea that the moment that woman recognized the birthmark, a countdown had already started. Because in that world, information travels fast. And if Junho's people knew about the mark, it meant whoever had lied to him 3 years ago knew too. And that person had already made a call to the Cho family. The message was simple. Junho Kong has an heir. Get to the child before he does. This is the part where the story stops being a family drama and becomes something you cannot look away from. 2 black vans arrived outside Seo-yeon's apartment building at almost the exact same moment. One carried Junho's men. The other carried men from the Cho family. Seo-yeon had less than 90 seconds to decide whether her daughter would survive the night. She grabbed Ha-eun, slipped out through the building's back stairwell, and ran into the alley behind the complex, straight into the arms of a man she hadn't seen in 3 years. Yun-hoo. He hadn't sent his men to grab the child. He had come himself. For the first time since that hospital room, he looked down, really looked, at the terrified 3-year-old clinging to her mother's leg. And he saw the birthmark with his own eyes. Every wall he had spent 3 years building came down in a single second. I made a mistake, he said. I'm going to fix it. But we need to move right now. Now stay with me, because what happens over the next 10 minutes is the reason this story doesn't stay a family drama. It becomes a full-scale war between 2 criminal networks disguised as corporations. And the person who lit the match is someone none of them saw coming. If you thought the birthmark was the twist, you have no idea what's actually coming. They didn't go to the Kong estate, too exposed, too obvious. Junho took Seo-yeon and Ha-eun to a private property outside the city, a location that, by his own security protocol, only 3 people were supposed to know existed. Yun-hoo, his head of security, and his cousin Tae-min, the man who had grown up beside him, who managed internal security for the entire family, who had sat beside him at every holiday table for over 20 years. The same Tae-min who had planted the lie about the baby 3 years earlier. Because Tae-min wasn't just envious of Junho's position in the family. Tae-min had been quietly working with the Cho family for over 2 years, feeding them shipment routes and security gaps, slowly positioning himself to take control once Junho and his older brother were out of the picture. A daughter with Junho's blood, and the Kong mark wasn't just an heir. She was the one thing that could undo everything Tae-min had spent years building. So when Junho sent a coded message to the 3 people who knew about the safe house, Tae-min was one of them. 20 minutes later, 6 armed men from the Cho family were closing in on that location. Seo-yeon had no idea any of this was happening. She only knew that Junho's phone kept buzzing, and his expression kept getting darker with every message. They're coming, he finally said. And I already know who told them where we are. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't ending quietly. But what Junho does in the next few minutes isn't just about protecting his daughter. It's about deciding once and for all what kind of man he's going to be for the rest of his life. And that decision costs him something he can never get back. Keep watching, because the ending flips everything you think you know about him. Junho didn't run. He hid Seo-yeon and Ha-eun in a reinforced room beneath the property, told her not to open that door for anyone but him, and then did something that shocked even his own men. He called Tae-min directly. I know it was you, he said. 3 years ago and again tonight. Tae-min didn't deny it. He laughed. He said Junho had gone soft, that a man who lets a woman and a child distract him from the family's business doesn't deserve to inherit anything. He said the Cho family had already promised him control of the entire shipping division once Junho and the girl were gone. Junho said one thing back. You should have just asked me for a bigger share. Instead, you tried to erase my daughter. When the Cho family's men breached the property 12 minutes later, they didn't find a distracted, grieving man. They found Junho Kong fighting like someone with nothing left to lose, because for the first time in 3 years, he had everything to protect. The confrontation that followed cost him 2 of his own men. It cost the Cho family their entire strike team. And when it was finally over, Junho found Taemin waiting outside, still convinced he could talk his way out of what he'd done. He couldn't. What happened between them in that final minute is something Junho never spoke about again. Not to his men, not to Seo-yeon, not to anyone in the family. All that's known is that Taemin never made it back to report to the Cho family what had happened that night. And the war that had been quietly building for years ended that same night. Not because of a boardroom decision or a business dispute, but because someone had threatened his daughter. 6 months later, Seo-yeon and Haeun live in a home with real protection, real safety, and a father who has never once missed putting his daughter to bed. Junho still runs the Kong group. But everyone in that world now understands one unspoken rule. You do not go near that child. The birthmark that once made Junho doubt everything became the exact thing that saved his daughter's life, because it was undeniable, unfakeable, and impossible to erase. But here's what I keep thinking about, and I need to know if you caught it too.
Junho trusted Taemin for over 20 years.
20 years of family dinners, holidays, secrets. And Taemin was lying the entire time. So tell me, if you were Junho, and you found out the person closest to you had betrayed you not once, but twice, would you have done what he did? Or would you have shown mercy? Drop your answer below, because I've read the comments on stories like this before, and you are not going to agree with each other. And if you want to see what happens when Seo-yeon finds out the full truth about who Taemin really was, because trust me, there's more, let me know in the comments, because I already have that story ready to go.